All right, so today, guys, we are looking at something entirely new, right? We're turning the corner in terms of kind of eras of history, and we're starting to take a look at the Constitution, constitutional compromises. So let's go ahead and get started here. We have to understand that this is really kind of a dangerous area for this new nation, right? The Articles of Confederation, our very first governing document, seems to have failed miserably, and I would agree with that. Right? We had to find a better way forward. We had to find a better way of governing because Shays' Rebellion clearly showed that the Articles of Confederation had some major holes, had some major gaps. But that presents a problem, right? Because you've basically said to the people, "Well, help us overthrow a monarch, help us replace it with something that is more friendly to the people." So they do that. We overthrow a government. Then we institute a brand new government, or sorry, we overthrow a monarch, and then we institute a brand new government, only to say, sorry, that didn't really work. We're going to try again, but trust us, right? I wonder how many times you can do that before you lose the trust and faith of the people you're trying to lead. And so that's part of the worry here is we've really got to get this thing right. Otherwise, we may not get another shot at it, right? This may be it. And so the Constitutional Convention is really going to face some of its biggest challenges. There are delegates from every state, but some of the biggest challenges are going to be faced in finding a way forward through congressional representation. They know that the body of Congress has to be representative of the different colonies. But how do we do that? And ultimately, there's a couple of different plans out there. The New Jersey plan is one plan that wanted, you can imagine where it came from, right? They wanted congressional representation to be equal, right? One state equals one vote. That way, every state is equal. No state is more powerful than any other state. Sounds pretty fair. However, the Virginia plan means that excuse me. Sorry. So that was the New Jersey plan. Now the Virginia plan. The Virginia plan basically says, no, we don't like that, right? We're a larger state. We have more citizens. If we have more citizens, that should equate to more votes, right? If Rhode Island has the same number of congressional votes that we have, then each person in Rhode Island, being such a small state, is represented proportionally more, right? And we're saying that because Virginia is such a large state, at that time it was the most populous state, we should get more votes because we have more citizens. We have more people whose lives are at stake, whose opinions matter. Well, I can see the logic in that as well, right? I understand both sides of this thing. The stalemate is really kind of broken with the introduction of a new plan, and it's a plan called the Connecticut Plan, or sometimes called the Great Compromise. And what this does is it really kind of marries both of those plans. Congress now is not going to be one house, it's going to be what we call bicameral. It's made up of two houses. One house is the Senate, that's the upper house. The lower house is called the House of Representatives. Now, representation in the Senate, the upper house, is going to be based on one state, one vote, right? Uh, Actually, it winds up being each state gets two votes. You get two senators in each state, but it's based on state equality, right? So that the large states in population can't overshadow, overpower the smaller population states. Every state in the Senate is equal. Now, on the other side, the House of Representatives, that lower house, that's going to be based on population, meaning more people equals more votes. Is it a perfect system? No. It's a compromise. You're going to get some of what you want, and you're going to have to give up some of what they want. But ultimately, it's enough to make both sides, both the large states in population and the smaller states, feel like, okay, we're not going to be totally dominated here. We're not going to be completely put out. So the other major sticking point is going to be, how do we count slaves towards representation? Because if, especially for the larger states like Virginia that also had a lot of slaves, they're looking at, well, if we count our slaves towards our population, then that population gets us more representation in the House of Representatives, and therefore more power, more opportunity to kind of get our way and push through our agendas, right? Which is really an interesting thing because And of course, we see the flaw in this logic, right? You want to deny slaves their basic human right to freedom and all other rights to human dignity, right? At the same time, you want to use them to help you gain power and influence. So, states with large slave populations, they want their slaves to count towards representation. But some of the northern states, the smaller states, are worried that that's going to overbalance and overpower their states, right? The ones that are already maybe moving towards fewer slaves and starting to even in some places become abolition minded, right? They didn't want slaves to count at all, right? If you're not going to count them as human beings, right? If you're not going to count them as people that have rights, then why in the world would you use them, be allowed to use them to secure greater rights for yourselves? So the solution that breaks that stalemate, right, is called the three-fifths compromise. Now, these things seem like they're really hard, and they would be, right? They'd be serious sticking points if there wasn't maybe something bigger looming out there. And that is the fear that if they don't get something done, they lose the faith of the people. So they may be willing to swallow more or accept more than they otherwise would because there is a larger threat out there that this thing teeters on a knife's edge, right? It could end disastrously. It could be a short-lived experiment on freedom. But this three-fifths compromise says very simply, and I think most of us probably know this by now, that slaves are going to count not as whole persons, but as three-fifths of a person. So in that way, slaves still count for representation, but not as heavily as they would have, would the southern states would have liked, right? So neither state or neither side got everything that they wanted. They each got just enough to be able to move forward past those sticking points, right? So while it's far from perfect, these things are going to allow the Constitution to pass. People are going to say, well, it's a far better thing than what we would have had under the Articles of Confederation. The new Constitution provides for a military, it provides for an executive branch, it provides for some some taxing authority, right? So it kind of fixes the problems of the previous governing document and creates a stronger federal system for us to lean on in times of crisis and whatnot. Now, it causes other potential crises down the road, but it certainly fixes the ones that Shays' Rebellion shone a light on. So anyway, that is really some of the constitutional compromises. In a nutshell, it lets us know how the thing was passed. We'll talk more about the two different sides, right? The idea of the Federalist and the Anti-Federalists, what they both wanted in an upcoming video. But for now, subscribe, leave me any comments that you'd like. I'd love to hear from you guys, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it.